Lin Zexu was a Chinese scholar and an official of the Qing dynasty, born in 1785 and died in 1850. He adamantly opposed the opium trade on economic, moral, and social grounds, and his opposition was considered to be the primary catalyst for the First Opium War of 1839 to 1842. He was praised for his constant position on moral high ground, but blamed for a rigid and conservative approach to European trade and the opium trade, which did not account for the domestic and international complexities of the opium trade. Although the medicinal consumption of opium was banned by the Yongzheng Emperor in 1729, by the 1830s China's economy and society was being damaged by increased imports by Chinese smugglers who illegally bought opium from British and American traders. The Dongwang Emperor endorsed the hardline policies advocated by Lin, but ultimately blames Lin for the resulting disastrous war. In March of 1839, Chinese government sent Zexu to put an end to opium trade, since he had already successfully shut down the trade in his own province. Unlike many officials, he would not take bribes to stop trying to shut down the trade. Lin was pretty successful because of his strong determination and morals against the opium trade, but his confiscation of mass amounts of opium angered the British and they started taking military action against China. The British saw Zexu as arrogant and unreasonable, and opium wasn't the main reason for the outbreak of violence. Zexu eventually expelled all British from China and shut down trade between the two countries. In 1840, British armies attacked China. Since China was not prepared for war, they were defeated, and Europe started carving out China economically, politically, and socially. He was incredibly significant in Chinese history because he had a big part in starting the Opium Wars.
China had the Opium Wars in 1850 to 1864. China was then defeated by the European nations such as France and Britain. Because China lost the Opium War, they lost control of their seaports. The seaports became treaty ports, which meant that any nation could sail to China and trade freely with them. This led to the European nations coming to China to claim land and trade with the Chinese people. Europeans came to China with opium, looking to trade with Chinese merchants for goods. Once in China, the European nations divided land called the spheres of influence within China. For example, France and Britain. Extraterritoriality is like the legal stuff that goes on within the spheres of influence. For example, they could trade opium within the spheres to the Chinese without getting into trouble with Lin Zexu and the Qing. So basically, China couldn't do anything within the spheres of influence.
As the international climate was changing in the 19th century, China needed to change too. According to Thomas Kennedy of Washington State University, China was pressured not only from the outside, but also by its own explosive population growth, unpredictable economic swings, and international rebellions, such as the devastating Taiping. Initially, China was wary that Western adaptations would poison their traditional religious beliefs. Therefore, the self-strengthening movement was an ultimately futile attempt made from 1860 to 1895 by the Qing Empire to liberate China from foreign encroachment by selectively applying modern economic practices, military tactics, and technology to the pre-existing Orthodox Confucian framework. However, the self-strengthening movement operated on the flawed premise that modernization could be realized without meaningful political or social reform. In his paper, Professor Kennedy states Chinese reformers attempted the ancient Confucian concept of Tiyong, which literally translates to essence function. The scholars hope to integrate functional aspects of Western civilization to the essential values of Chinese civilization, using it as an intellectual disguise under which industrialization could be smuggled into China without disrupting social balance. However, Professor Kennedy notes an apparent fallacy in Tiyong's application. This syncretic avenue of integration put the contradictory forces of Western materialism and Confucian austerity at odds. In addition to the imperfect application of Tiyong, self-strengthening suffered from several paradoxes, says Thomas Kennedy. First, there was a tepid response from landlord leaders who refused to risk their status in the community. Second, competing regional leaders wanted to strengthen themselves, not centralized government, which was necessary to rebutting the West. Third, although self-strengthening was meant to increase industrialization and therefore urbanization, the Chinese simultaneously restored their rural social and economic order. Furthermore, traditional education was continued until 1890. Finally, although they sought a level of self-sufficiency by adopting the Western devices, China's new industry was still dependent on the machinery, material, and knowledge of foreigners. Their 1895 defeat in the Sino-Japanese War at the end of the self-strengthening movement enlightened the Chinese to their inadequacy and provided impetus for further reform. In addition, China's Qing proved to be a zhilaohu, or paper tiger. This realization was met with local opposition, like the Boxer Rebellion. Despite these setbacks, most historians agree that it was China's reluctance to adopt Western social and political policies, or Western essence, to complement its functions. Had they begun self-strengthening with more foundational foreign units rather than functional foreign units, China's self-strengthening attempt may have been more successful. Although their hearts were in the right place, and the correct measures were being taken towards modernization, pressures from the West did not allow the Chinese adequate time to institute their new policies successfully. The result was a string of failed movements and concessions to the over-aggressive West. Looking at the glass of Chinese colonialism half empty, China was invaded by Japan, faced the Boxer Uprising, and its Qing Empire collapsed. The half-full glass of Chinese colonialism contains the information that was contributed to Japan's rise to power, an international intellectual awakening, and the institution of new government systems, both communism and capitalism, which contributed to China's eventual superpower status.